I am Vada, 29 years old, and I never expected to be sitting here in my car hiding from my own family. Just an hour ago, I discovered the unthinkable. Medical records with my name on them altered to push me into being a surrogate for my sister Diane. My own parents forged documents about my body, my future. The betrayal burns deeper than anything I have ever known. Before I dive into this shocking story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for myself against unimaginable family pressure. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. My parents, Eleanor and Frank Anderson, ran a successful family law practice, and we lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in an upscale neighborhood. But beneath the manicured lawns and family portraits, there was always an unspoken hierarchy in our household. I was just 3 years old when my sister Diane was born. At first, having a baby sister seemed exciting. I would help my mother rock her to sleep and sing lullabies that made her smile. But as the years went by, I began to notice subtle changes in how our parents treated us differently. Diane quickly became the center of our family universe. Her accomplishments, no matter how small, were celebrated with enthusiasm and fanfare. When she won a participation ribbon in her first grade spelling bee, our parents took the entire family out for an expensive dinner. They hung her artwork prominently in the living room and created elaborate photo albums documenting her every milestone. My own achievements often seemed to fade into the background. When I placed first in the regional science competition in 4th grade, my mother simply nodded and said, "That is nice, Vada." My father barely looked up from his newspaper. There was no celebration dinner, no proud phone calls to relatives. Family vacations always revolved around Diane's interests. When she became fascinated with marine biology at age 10, we spent 2 weeks at an oceanside resort with daily visits to the aquarium. My suggestions to visit the Space Needle in Seattle or the national parks I had been studying were dismissed as something we can do another time, though that time never came. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. My parents attended every one of Diane's dance recitals, soccer games, and school plays, arriving early to secure front row seats. Meanwhile, they frequently missed my events, offering explanations like, "We have an important client meeting," or "Your father is too tired after his big case." One memory stands out painfully clear. When I was 12, I qualified for the state science competition with my project on cellular regeneration. The competition fell on the same day as Diane's dance recital. Without hesitation, my parents chose to attend Diane's performance. "Your grandfather can take you," my mother said, handing me bus fare. "Diane gets so nervous without us there." That day, standing alone with my blue ribbon while my grandfather Joseph snapped photos, I felt the full weight of my place in the family. Grandfather Joseph, a retired doctor, hugged me tightly and whispered, "I am so proud of you, Vada. You have a brilliant scientific mind." His words were a lifeline in a sea of parental indifference. Through necessity, I developed self-reliance and independence early. I learned to help myself with homework, pack my own lunches, and navigate public transportation to my activities. While my parents were driving Diane to private lessons and special camps, I was figuring out scholarship applications and planning my own future. My passion for medicine emerged during high school biology. Dissecting a fetal pig, I felt a strange sense of belonging, a clarity about my future that I had never experienced before. When I shared my dream of becoming a doctor with my parents, my father frowned. "Medical school is expensive, Vada. Perhaps nursing would be more practical." But Grandfather Joseph believed in me. A retired cardiologist, he would share medical journals with me and discuss cases from his practice. "You have the mind and the heart for medicine," he would tell me. "Never let anyone diminish your dreams." During these formative years, Diane's health issues began to surface. At 15, she was diagnosed with endometriosis after months of severe menstrual pain. The diagnosis transformed our parents from merely preferential to obsessively protective of Diane. Suddenly, family life entirely revolved around Diane's doctor appointments, special diets, and pain management. "Veda, you need to be more understanding," my mother would say whenever I expressed frustration about canceled plans or redirected attention. "Your sister is suffering. This is not about you." I felt genuine concern for my sister, who would curl up crying from the pain of her condition. I would bring her heating pads and the special tea that seemed to help. But beneath my compassion, resentment bubbled. Not because of her illness, but because even in my acts of care, I was invisible. "You should be doing more for your sister," my mother would say, even as I was already doing everything I could. By senior year of high school, I had secured a full academic scholarship to the University of Washington for pre-medical studies. When I announced my acceptance at dinner, my father nodded briefly before turning to Diane. "Did you decide about community college yet, sweetheart?" "No rush, of course. Your health comes first." That night, Grandfather Joseph called to congratulate me. "Your parents might not say it, but this is exceptional, Vada. You are going to make an incredible doctor someday." His belief in me was the foundation I needed to step out from under the shadow of my family dynamic and begin building my own life. Arriving at the University of Washington campus in Seattle felt like taking my first real breath. 300 miles from Portland, I could finally exist as just Veda, not as Diane's older sister or the less favored daughter. My dormitory room, though small and shared with a stranger, represented freedom I had never known. That stranger, Taylor Williams, quickly became the first real friend I had ever had. Outgoing and unapologetically authentic Taylor was studying journalism and approached life with curiosity and enthusiasm that I found infectious. "You mean you have never gone to a concert or stayed up all night just talking or tried sushi?" Taylor would ask, genuinely shocked at the narrowness of my experiences. Under Taylor's influence, I began to explore parts of myself that had been suppressed in my family home. I joined the pre-med society, but also took a pottery class just because it looked interesting. I learned to salsa dance tried foods from countries I could barely locate on a map, and spent hours in philosophical discussions about life and purpose. "You are like a flower that finally got sunlight," Taylor observed one night as we sat on the roof of our dormitory, watching city lights twinkle below us. "Each day, you seem more colorful, more yourself." In my organic chemistry lab, I was partnered with Marcus Chen, a brilliant methodical student who approached our experiments with precision that matched my own. Our shared dedication to academics forged a friendship built on mutual respect. When final exam period arrived, we would claim a corner of the library for marathon study sessions, quiz each other until dawn, and celebrate our A grades with cheap champagne. These new relationships showed me what genuine connection felt like, something I had never experienced within my own family. With Taylor and Marcus, I was valued for exactly who I was, not measured against someone else. Meanwhile, my contact with family became increasingly limited. I called home every Sunday night out of obligation, but these calls followed a predictable pattern. After brief perfunctory questions about my studies, the conversation would shift entirely to Diane's health, which seemed to be deteriorating. "The doctors are trying a new hormone therapy," my mother would report. She had to drop her psychology class because the pain was too distracting. "Your father and I are taking turns staying home with her." During my sophomore year, Diane's condition required laparoscopic surgery. I offered to come home, but my mother dismissed the suggestion. "Focus on your studies. There is nothing you can do here anyway." Yet during winter break, I discovered my presence was very much expected, not as a daughter or sister, but as a caretaker. "Since you are home, you can drive Diane to her appointments," my mother announced, "and help with her medication schedule. Your father and I need to catch up at the office." For 3 weeks, I became Diane's primary support person, adjusting my sleep schedule around her pain levels, preparing special meals according to her dietary restrictions, and sitting for hours in medical waiting rooms. While I did not resent helping my sister, who was clearly suffering, I could not help but notice that my parents had time for their work, but not for their younger daughter's care. When I returned to campus for the spring semester, I felt a mixture of guilt and relief. The guilt intensified when, during finals week of my junior year, my mother called, demanding I come home immediately. Diane had a bad reaction to her new medication. "She needs you," my mother insisted. "Mom, I have 3 finals tomorrow and the next day. I cannot just leave. Your sister is in pain. Vada are tests more important than family." The accusation stung, but I held firm. "I will come this weekend after my last exam." "I always knew you were selfish," my mother hissed before hanging up. That night, I called Grandfather Joseph in tears. "Am I selfish for not dropping everything right now?" "Absolutely not," he assured me. "Your education matters. Your life matters. Eleanor always had a flair for dramatic manipulation even as a child. Stand your ground, Veda." His unwavering support gave me the strength to complete my finals before returning home to a glacial reception from my parents and a surprisingly understanding Diane. "You should not have to fail your classes for me," she whispered when we were alone. "Mom and Dad are being unreasonable." It was a rare moment of sisterly solidarity that warmed me despite the otherwise tense visit. The pattern continued through my senior year and acceptance to medical school. When the letter arrived confirming my admission to the University of Washington School of Medicine with a partial scholarship, I called home with the news. "That is nice," my mother said flatly. "Does this mean you will still be in Seattle? I was hoping you would consider transferring somewhere closer to help with Diane." Only Grandfather Joseph responded with the enthusiasm my achievement deserved. "I knew you could do it," he said, voice cracking with emotion. "Your grandmother would have been so proud." He sent me his own medical school graduation watch as a gift, a family heirloom that should have come from my parents. Medical school was even more demanding than undergraduate studies, but I thrived under the pressure. The complex systems of the human body fascinated me, and I discovered a particular interest in reproductive endocrinology, the study of fertility and hormonal disorders, including conditions like Diane's endometriosis. During my second year, I met Dr. Andrea Nolan, a pioneering female reproductive endocrinologist who became my mentor and role model. Short in stature but commanding in presence, Dr. Nolan took interest in my research and often invited me to observe her clinical practice. "You have exceptional instincts, Veda," she told me after I correctly identified a rare hormonal imbalance in one of her patients. "And a genuine compassion that cannot be taught. This field needs doctors like you." While I was building my identity as a future physician, Diane's life was taking a different turn. At 22, she married her high school sweetheart, Will Garrett, in an elaborate ceremony that my parents spared no expense to fund. During the reception, I overheard my mother telling relatives, "They want to start a family right away. Diane will make such a wonderful mother." The irony was not lost on me that while I was studying the complexities of human reproduction, my sister was already expected to begin reproducing. Within months of the wedding, the calls from home increasingly centered on Diane's frustration at not conceiving immediately. "Your sister has been trying for 6 months now with no success," my mother reported. "With her endometriosis history, we are worried. Since you are studying this area, what can you tell us?" For the first time, my medical knowledge made me valuable in my family's eyes. I explained about ovulation tracking timing and the statistics of conception even for healthy couples. I suggested Diane consult with a specialist sooner rather than later, given her medical history. When Diane began fertility treatments during my final year of medical school, our conversations became more frequent and substantive. She would call with questions about procedures and medications, genuinely interested in my expertise. These calls represented the most equal relationship we had ever had, and I cherished this new dynamic between us. My graduation from medical school coincided with Diane's formal diagnosis of infertility due to advanced endometriosis and diminished ovarian reserve. While my family attended my graduation ceremony, their conversation afterwards centered entirely around the devastating news Diane had received the day before. The doctor said her uterine lining is too compromised for implantation, my mother explained, barely acknowledging the doctoral hood I had just received. They are suggesting surrogacy as the only option, but the cost is astronomical. I felt the familiar sting of invisibility on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life, but also genuine sympathy for my sister's heartbreak. Little did I know that this diagnosis would set in motion a series of events that would forever change our family dynamic. After completing my medical degree, I accepted a residency position at Portland Memorial Hospital, specializing in reproductive endocrinology. The decision to return to my hometown was complex, driven partly by the prestigious program and partly by a sense that perhaps, as an adult and physician, I could establish a healthier relationship with my family. I found an apartment in the Pearl District close enough to visit family, but far enough to maintain independence. The 3 years of residency were intense, with 80-hour work weeks and constant learning. Despite the grueling schedule, I found profound fulfillment in helping patients navigate the complex and emotional journey of fertility treatment. My department head, Dr. Lawrence Friedman, often commented on my natural ability to explain complicated medical concepts in accessible terms. "You have a gift for making patients feel understood," he told me after observing a consultation. "That is as important as the technical skills in this field." Under his guidance, I began developing expertise in the emerging field of fertility preservation for cancer patients. While my professional life flourished, my sister Diane's situation deteriorated. After 3 failed rounds of IVF using her own eggs, she had fallen into a deep depression. During our increasingly rare family dinners, she appeared hollow-eyed and withdrawn, barely engaging in conversation. Will, once jovial and talkative, now seemed constantly on edge, watching Diane with worried eyes. "Have you considered therapy?" I suggested gently during one such dinner. The emotional toll of fertility treatments can be as challenging as the physical aspects. "We do not need therapy," my mother interjected sharply. "We need solutions, medical solutions." She fixed me with a pointed stare, one I could not yet interpret. It was during this period that I met Noah Reynolds, a pediatric physical therapist who worked at the same hospital. We first crossed paths in the cafeteria when he accidentally took my coffee. "I am so sorry," he said, his warm brown eyes crinkling apologetically. "Apparently, sleep deprivation affects coffee identification skills." His easy humor and genuine kindness drew me immediately. Unlike the competitive medical residents I was surrounded by, daily Noah had a centered, compassionate presence that felt like coming home. Our relationship developed naturally, from coffee breaks to dinners to weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge. Noah had grown up in a loving, functional family, something that was almost anthropologically fascinating to me. The first time I witnessed his parents engaging with him, listening attentively, and expressing unconditional support, I felt a strange mixture of awe and grief for what my childhood could have been. "Your family seems complicated," Noah observed carefully after meeting them at a tense Sunday dinner. "The dynamic between you and your sister and how your parents interact with both of you, it is well noticeable." "That obvious, huh?" I smiled ruefully. "Only to someone paying attention," he replied, squeezing my hand. "And I pay attention to everything about you." Noah's insights helped me recognize patterns I had normalized, and his unwavering support became my anchor as family pressure began mounting in unexpected ways. The first hint came during a seemingly casual family dinner 6 months into my residency. As we finished dessert, my father cleared his throat. "We have been reading about gestational surrogacy. he said, avoiding direct eye contact. Fascinating process, medically speaking. One woman carrying another's biological child. Yes, it is an important option for many patients, I replied professionally. Though complicated legally and emotionally. But between family members, surely that would be simpler, my mother pressed. Sisters, for example, the implication hung heavily in the air. Diane stared intently at her plate while Will examined his water glass with sudden fascination. Actually, family surrogacy arrangements can be the most complex emotionally, I answered carefully. The existing relationship dynamics can complicate the necessary boundaries. The subject was dropped for the moment, but the seed had been planted. At every subsequent gathering, surrogacy was mentioned hypothetically, or as an interesting medical phenomenon. Each time the conversation inched closer to the unspoken question. The formal request came during Thanksgiving dinner. After the pumpkin pie was served, Diane reached for Will's hand and turned to me with reddened eyes. Veda, we have exhausted all other options, she began, voice trembling. The doctors say surrogacy is our only chance for a biological child. Would you consider being our surrogate? Despite having anticipated this moment, hearing the request spoken aloud made my stomach clench. I looked at my sister's desperate face, my parents' expectant expressions, and felt the weight of their collective hope pressing against my chest. That is an enormous decision, I said finally. As a doctor, I would need to consider all the medical implications, including for my own future fertility. I would need time to think and to run proper tests before I could even consider it. Of course you need to think about yourself first, my mother said, her tone making the statement an accusation rather than understanding. Eleanor, my father murmured warningly. I just meant Veda should take whatever time she needs, my mother amended, though her tight smile betrayed her impatience. Noah, who had been invited to the family Thanksgiving, squeezed my knee supportively under the table. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, he finally spoke. Whatever you decide about this surrogacy question, it needs to be your choice. Not from guilt or obligation. Your body, your decision. His words gave me the courage to schedule comprehensive fertility testing for myself before making any decision. If I was going to consider surrogacy, I needed to understand my own reproductive health status first, including how it might impact my future ability to have children. The testing process was strange, being on the patient side of procedures I usually administered. Blood draws for hormone levels, transvaginal ultrasounds to assess my ovarian reserve, and genetic screening, all standard protocol for potential surrogates. A week later, Dr. Tosse. Catherine Santos, a colleague who had conducted my tests to maintain professional boundaries, called me into her office with a puzzled expression. Veda, I am a bit confused by your results, she began, spreading several papers across her desk. According to these tests, you have significantly diminished ovarian reserve and hormonal indicators consistent with premature ovarian insufficiency. I stared at her, stunned. That cannot be right. I have regular cycles, no symptoms whatsoever. That is exactly why I am confused, Dr. Santos replied. The clinical picture does not match these results. I would like to repeat the testing if you are comfortable with that. We scheduled repeat tests for the following week. In the meantime, Dr. Santos quietly began investigating the discrepancy, reviewing lab procedures, and chain of custody for my samples. The repeated tests showed completely normal results, contradicting the first set entirely. Dr. Santos called me immediately. Vada, I need to show you something disturbing, she said when I arrived at her office. We reviewed security footage from the lab area on the day of your initial testing. She turned her computer monitor toward me. The grainy video showed a familiar figure speaking with a lab technician near the processing area, Eleanor Anderson, my mother. My blood ran cold as the implications washed over me. Are you saying? I cannot make accusations, Dr. Santos said carefully. But there are serious irregularities with how your samples were handled. The technician has been suspended pending investigation. That evening, while my parents attended a charity function, I used my emergency key to enter their house. In my father's home office, I searched through his files until I found a folder with my name. Inside were documents that confirmed my worst fears. Falsified medical history forms, indicating a family history of premature menopause, manipulated genetic testing results suggesting I carried markers for reproductive issues, and consent forms with forged initials that I supposedly signed during routine physicals. My parents had been systematically creating a medical case to convince me that being a surrogate for Diane was my only chance to contribute to our family's genetic future before my own fertility failed. The betrayal was so profound, so calculated, that I sat on my father's office floor, clutching the evidence and struggling to breathe. These were not just my parents. They were attorneys who had violated medical ethics, committed fraud, and attempted to manipulate me into surrendering my body based on lies. I photographed every document before carefully returning them to the folder. 2 days later, I brought the evidence to our next family dinner. As my mother served coffee after the meal, I placed the photographs on the dining table one by one. I need someone to explain these to me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The color drained from my mother's face. My father reached for the photos, then withdrew his hand, as if they might burn him. "Where did you get these?" he asked hoarsely. "Does that matter more than what they are?" I countered. Diane looked between us, confused. "What is happening? What are those forged medical documents?" I explained, turning to her. "Falsified test results designed to make me believe I am facing premature ovarian failure, all to manipulate me into agreeing to be your surrogate before my own fertility supposedly disappears." Diane's eyes widened in shock. She turned to our parents. "Tell me this is not true." My mother's shock quickly hardened into defensiveness. "We were trying to help you both. Vada would never agree otherwise, and your mental health is deteriorating with each failed attempt. Sometimes the end justifies the means." The end, the end. My voice rose despite my attempts to remain calm. "You were willing to put me through a pregnancy based on lies potentially jeopardizing my health and my career." "It would be 1 year of your life," my mother countered. "For your sister's lifetime of happiness. Why are you always so selfish?" Selfish. The accusation knocked the breath from me. Is it selfish to want autonomy over my own body? To expect honesty from my family? "You have always been difficult, Veda." My father joined in, finding his voice. "Always thinking about yourself first. Diane has suffered her entire life with endometriosis. You have had everything easy, a healthy body, scholarships, career success. You owe her this." The word "owe" ignited something in me. "I do not owe anyone use of my uterus," I stated firmly. "Not even family. Especially not family who would deceive me about my own health." I turned to Diane, whose face had crumpled into tears. "Diane, I am truly sorry for your struggles, but this is not the way. I cannot believe you would support this deception." I did not know about the forged documents," she stammered, looking uncertainly at our parents. "But I did know they were going to try to convince you somehow. I was desperate, Vada. You cannot understand unless you have wanted a baby this badly." "So you were okay with them pressuring me, just not with how they did it?" I asked, the last shred of hope for her support evaporating. Will, who had remained silent throughout, looked uncomfortable, but offered no defense. Their united front of expectations suffocated me. I stood gathering the photographs. "I need space from all of you. What you have done is not just unethical, it is potentially criminal. Forging medical records, attempting to coerce medical decisions, I cannot even process the level of violation. You would threaten legal action against your own family, my father demanded, his lawyer persona emerging. After everything we have done for you. The irony of his statement was too much. Tears burning my eyes, I walked out of their house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely call Noah to pick me up. That night, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. Against my better judgment, I answered. Veda, you need to reconsider, she said without preamble. This family needs unity now more than ever. Diane is inconsolable. I need time, I managed to say before ending the call. Lying beside Noah that night, I made my decision. I am going to take a break from my family, I whispered into the darkness. And I am going to report the medical records tampering. It is not just about me, it is about protecting other patients too. Noah stroked my hair gently. Whatever you need, I am here. Always. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I slept without nightmares. The days following my confrontation with my family should have brought relief, but instead unleashed a coordinated pressure campaign that left me reeling. My parents, unwilling to accept my boundaries, launched a systematic effort to force my compliance through any means necessary. The barrage began with daily phone calls and messages escalating from pleading to thinly veiled threats. You are destroying this family, my mother texted at 3 a.m. Diane can barely get out of bed because of your selfishness. My father, the more strategic of the two, focused on financial leverage. Remember who helped with the down payment on your apartment? He reminded me in a voicemail. Family investments come with family obligations. When I did not respond to their direct communications, they recruited extended family members as foot soldiers in their campaign. My Aunt Susan, my mother's older sister, called under the pretense of just checking in before launching into a prepared speech. Family makes sacrifices for each other, Vada, she lectured. When my kidney function declined, your Uncle Robert did not hesitate to get tested as a donor. That was his choice, Aunt Susan, I replied evenly. Made with accurate medical information and without coercion. Well, she huffed, some people just have bigger hearts than others. The calls from various aunts, uncles, and cousins followed a similar script, making me realize my parents had crafted a narrative portraying me as the villain in Diane's fertility struggle. None of them seemed aware of the forged documents or manipulation, only that I had selfishly refused to help my suffering sister. Even my social media accounts became battlegrounds. Cousins I barely spoke to left comments asking how I could sleep at night, knowing I was denying Diane her only chance at motherhood. Diane herself posted vague, passive-aggressive updates about family betrayal and the pain of broken trust, which garnered dozens of sympathetic responses. The most painful recruitment was my grandfather Joseph. For 2 weeks after the confrontation, he had been traveling in Arizona, unreachable by phone. When he returned, my mother immediately brought him into their narrative. Veda, he said when he finally called me, his voice heavy with disappointment. Your parents told me you refused to even consider helping Diane. That does not sound like the compassionate granddaughter I know. My heart sank. Grandpa, they are not telling you everything. They forged my medical records to scare me into surrogacy. They created fake test results showing I was losing my fertility. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. That is a very serious accusation, Vada. I have proof, I insisted. Security footage of Mom in the lab, the falsified documents themselves. Please, you have to believe me. I want to see you and this evidence in person, he finally said. This Sunday. Do not tell your parents I am meeting you. His doubt hurt, but at least he was willing to hear me out, which was more than anyone else in the family had offered. The professional repercussions came simultaneously with the personal ones. The hospital ethics committee launched an investigation into the forged documents requiring statements from everyone involved. The lab technician who had allowed my mother access admitted she had been told Eleanor Anderson was a consulting physician reviewing procedures. In the midst of this investigation, my parents showed up at the hospital, creating a scene in the main lobby that echoed through the professional hallways I had worked so hard to be respected in. "My daughter is making false accusations against our family," my mother announced loudly to the startled receptionist. "We need to speak with the hospital administrator immediately." Security was called to escort them out, and I was summoned to the administrative offices to explain the situation. The hospital's legal team advised me to consider a temporary restraining order, which I reluctantly filed that afternoon. The order was a necessary boundary, but it escalated the family campaign. Unable to confront me directly, my parents intensified their efforts through others. Noah's steadying presence became my lifeline during this period. "This is textbook emotional abuse," he observed one evening as I showed him the 37 text messages I had received from family members that day. "They are trying to wear you down through volume and persistence." Noah's parents, Barbara and Robert, offered perspective I desperately needed. "When we first met you, we noticed how you flinch whenever you think you have disappointed someone," Barbara said gently during dinner at their home. "That is not normal, Veda. That is the physical manifestation of conditional love." With Noah's encouragement, I began therapy with Dr. Melissa Wright, a specialist in family trauma. In our first session, she helped me identify the patterns of manipulation I had normalized since childhood. "The surrogacy demand is just an extreme version of what they have always done," Dr. Wright pointed out. "Using your achievements, your capabilities, your very body, to fulfill their vision for your sister's life, rather than allowing you autonomy." These insights gave me strength, but the pressure remained relentless. The most unexpected development came when Will Diane's husband texted asking to meet privately at a coffee shop far from their neighborhood. I arrived cautiously, half expecting my parents to jump out in some sort of ambush. Instead, I found only Will looking exhausted and conflicted. "Thank you for coming," he said, pushing a cup of my favorite tea across the table. "I needed to talk to you away from everyone else." He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from his dating days with Diane. "I feel trapped, Vada. Your parents and Diane, they are so focused on having a baby that everything else has disappeared. Our relationship, our finances, our future plans all sacrificed to this single goal." "I am sorry, Will. That sounds incredibly difficult." "Here is the thing," he continued, voice lowered. "I am not even sure I want a child anymore, not like this, not with how obsessive everyone has become. But saying that out loud would make me the monster instead of you." His admission surprised me. "Have you told Diane how you feel?" "I have tried. She cannot hear it. And your parents—" He shook his head. "They have convinced her that a baby will fix everything, her health, her depression, our marriage. When I express any doubt, they suggest I am not committed enough." He leaned forward urgently. "You should know they are planning to publicly confront you at some community event. They want to force your hand through public pressure. I do not know details, but please be careful." His warning proved accurate. The next day, an anonymous letter was sent to my department head, questioning my ethics and commitment to helping families. Though Dr. Friedman immediately recognized it as a smear campaign, the incident left me feeling vulnerable in what had been my safe haven. My colleagues rallied around me when they learned the full story. Dr. Santos, who had discovered the initial tampering, became particularly protective, escorting me to my car after late shifts and helping screen my professional calls. The pressure campaign might have broken me if not for the hospital investigation results, which fully supported my claims. Security footage document analysis and the lab technician's testimony created an irrefutable case that medical fraud had occurred. The hospital administration offered their full support and enhanced security measures for my protection. This institutional validation gave me the strength to continue standing my ground against the tsunami of family pressure. I began to understand that what I was fighting for went beyond this specific situation. It was about establishing the right to my own body and choices after a lifetime of being secondary to Diane's needs and wants. As the hospital fundraising gala approached an event where I was scheduled to receive recognition for my research on fertility preservation techniques, I felt a growing anxiety. The gala represented both professional achievement and potential vulnerability, a public venue where my family might attempt the confrontation Will had warned about. The night of the Portland Memorial Hospital fundraising gala arrived with a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. The event was being held at the Crystal Ballroom downtown, an elegant venue with soaring ceilings and chandeliers that caught the light like suspended raindrops. Under different circumstances, I would have been solely focused on the professional honor of receiving recognition for my research. Instead, I found myself scanning each new arrival with anxious vigilance. Noah squeezed my hand as we entered the ballroom. "You look stunning," he whispered, "and your research deserves this recognition. Try to focus on that tonight." I had chosen a deep blue gown that made me feel both professional and confident, but now I tugged at it nervously. What if they show up? What if they make a scene? "Then security will handle it," Noah replied firmly. "The hospital administrator knows the situation. You have done nothing wrong, Vada." We made our way through the crowd, accepting congratulations from colleagues and engaging in the expected small talk. Dr. Friedman beamed with mentor's pride when introducing me to board members. Dr. Santos gave me a reassuring thumbs up from across the room. For a brief period, I allowed myself to relax and enjoy the professional acknowledgement I had earned through years of dedication. The illusion of normalcy shattered halfway through the dinner service. From the corner of my eye, I spotted them, the unmistakable figures of my parents entering the ballroom, with Diane trailing behind them. My mother wore her most formidable black cocktail dress, the one reserved for courtroom victories and intimidation. My father's expression was grim determination. Diane looked pale and uncertain, her eyes darting around the room until they found me. "They are here," I whispered to Noah, my fork clattering against my plate. Before Noah could respond, Dr. Friedman approached our table. "Veda, is that your family? They don't appear to have tickets for this event." "Yes," I confirmed, my stomach nodding. "They weren't invited." "I will handle this," he assured me, signaling to security with a subtle hand gesture. I watched with a mixture of dread and vindication as a security team intercepted my family before they could reach my table. My mother's voice, however, carried clearly through the elegant space. "That is my daughter over there. I have every right to be at her recognition ceremony." Heads turned throughout the ballroom. My colleagues at nearby tables exchanged uncomfortable glances. The background music and dinner conversations faltered momentarily. "Ma'am, this is a private fundraising event," the security guard explained firmly. "Without tickets, we must ask you to leave." "This is ridiculous," my mother exclaimed, her voice rising further. "We are here to support our daughter." My father placed a restraining hand on her arm, his lawyer's sense detecting the increasing legal complications of their intrusion. My mother shook him off, her eyes locked on me across the room. "Veda," she called out. "Tell them to let us stay. Tell them we are your family." The spotlight of attention that had shifted to this confrontation made me feel physically ill. Years of conditioning to avoid public family conflict warred with my newfound determination to maintain boundaries. Noah placed his hand over mine on the table, grounding me in the present moment. Dr. Santos appeared at my side. "Do you want me to escort you somewhere private until this is resolved?" Before I could answer, the security team began firmly guiding my parents toward the exit. My mother's protests grew louder, more desperate. "She is betraying her sister. Ask her why she won't help her own family. Ask her why she is so selfish." The accusations hung in the air like poison. I could feel the curious, pitying glances of everyone in the room. Years of professional accomplishment seemed to dissolve under the acid of my mother's public condemnation. Then something unexpected happened. Diane broke away from the security guards and rushed toward my table. The guards hesitated, looking to the event coordinator for direction. "Can we talk?" Diane pleaded, reaching my side. "Please, Veda, just for a minute, in private." Against my better judgment and with Noah's concerned expression following us, I led Diane to an empty conference room adjacent to the ballroom. My professional training kicked in as I observed my sister's physical state, her rapid breathing, dilated pupils, and trembling hands suggesting extreme emotional distress. "You have 5 minutes," I said more coldly than I intended. Diane paced the small room, her fancy dress swishing with each turn. "I need you to know," she began, then stopped, started again. "The documents." I knew. The admission hit like a physical blow. "You knew they were forging my medical records." She nodded miserably. "Not at first, but when Mom mentioned the test results showing your diminished ovarian reserve, I remembered your usual cycle tracking and how you had never mentioned symptoms. It didn't add up. And you said nothing." My voice rose despite my efforts to maintain composure. "I was desperate, Veda." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't understand what this feels like, this emptiness, this failure. Every month that passes is another death, another loss. I just wanted it to stop hurting." "So you were willing to lie to me to let them manipulate me into risking my health, my career, my future fertility, all to make your pain stop?" Diane sank into a chair. "When you put it that way, it sounds terrible." "Because it is terrible," I replied firmly. "This isn't just about surrogacy anymore. This is about a lifetime of Mom and Dad treating me as less important, less valuable than you. And you accepting that as your right." My sister looked up, genuine confusion in her expression. "What are you talking about? They've always been so hard on you because they knew you could handle it. They babied me because they thought I was fragile." "That's their narrative, and you've believed it because it benefits you," I countered. "But the reality is, they've consistently sacrificed my needs for yours, and now they've crossed into criminal behavior to continue that pattern." The door opened before Diane could respond. Dr. Wright, my therapist, slipped into the room. I had invited her to the gala as part of my support system, never imagining how necessary her presence would become. "Everything okay in here?" she asked, her professional demeanor calming the charged atmosphere. "We're having a difficult family discussion," I explained. "I can see that," Dr. Wright replied. "Would it help to have a neutral third party present?" Diane looked between us. "You're Veda's therapist, aren't you? The one our parents say is turning her against family?" Dr. Wright smiled gently. "I help Veda process her experiences and make decisions that are healthy for her. That's all." The door opened again, this time revealing Will. His expression showed equal parts concern and resignation. "Diane, we should go," he said quietly. "Your parents have been escorted to the parking lot, and this isn't the place." "Will, please," Diane implored. "Help me make Vada understand how important this is to us." The moment hung suspended as Will looked between his wife and me. Then with visible effort, he straightened his shoulders. "Actually, Diane, I need to tell you something I've been trying to say for months." He took a deep breath. "I've filed for a legal separation. I can't continue in this marriage as it is now with every aspect of our lives consumed by the baby quest." Diane's face drained of color. "What here now?" "I'm sorry for the timing," Will continued. "But watching your parents cross line after line, seeing what this obsession is doing to everyone involved, including you, I can't be part of it anymore. Not unless things change dramatically." Diane's body seemed to fold in on itself as the implications of his words registered. A keening sound escaped her throat, raw and primal. Dr. Wright moved to her side, offering professional support in the moment of crisis. The conference room door burst open once more, revealing my parents, who had somehow evaded security and followed the commotion. They took in the tableau before them: Diane sobbing, Will standing firm, Dr. Wright providing support, and me watching it all with a mixture of compassion and resolution. "What have you done now?" my mother demanded, glaring at me as if I had orchestrated Will's announcement. Before I could respond, the hospital administrator appeared behind them, security guards flanking her. "This ends now," she announced firmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, the hospital is prepared to pursue legal action for trespassing, disruption of a charitable event, and most seriously, the tampering with medical records that occurred on our premises." My father's legal mind immediately grasped the severity of the situation. "We should discuss this privately." He attempted slipping into attorney mode. "There will be time for discussions with our legal team," the administrator replied coolly. "For now, you are leaving this property one way or another." As security once again moved to escort my parents out, my mother's gaze remained fixed on me, a mixture of fury and betrayal that once would have crushed me. Now I recognized it for what it was: the desperation of someone losing control they never should have had. In the aftermath of their removal, Diane continued sobbing. Will stood awkwardly distant, and I felt strangely calm despite the chaos. Dr. Wright suggested taking Diane to a quiet area where she could compose herself, and Will agreed to accompany them. Left alone in the conference room, I took deep, steadying breaths. The confrontation I had dreaded had occurred, yet I was still standing. The professional reputation I had feared would be destroyed was intact. My colleagues had witnessed not my shame, but my family's inappropriate behavior. Noah found me there, his expression a question I answered with a simple nod. "I'm okay," I told him, and for the first time in weeks, it wasn't a lie. The drive home that night passed in contemplative silence. As we approached my apartment, my phone lit up with a call from Grandfather Joseph. "Veda," his voice crackled through the speaker. "I was at the country club when Eleanor called me, ranting about tonight's events. What happened?" I recounted the evening's dramatic confrontation, including Will's surprise announcement. "I've been looking into what you told me about the forged documents," Grandfather Joseph said when I finished. "I spoke with Dr. Santos today. I've seen the evidence." His voice broke slightly. "I believe you, Vada. I should have believed you immediately." His words, simple as they were, released something tight and painful in my chest. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. "This family has done you a great disservice," he continued. "Not just with these documents, but for many years. I saw it happening and didn't intervene strongly enough. That ends now." As Noah and I entered my apartment, I felt lighter despite the evening's turmoil. For the first time, I wasn't facing my family's dysfunction alone. I had professional allies, Noah's unwavering support, my grandfather's belated but firm advocacy, and most importantly, my own unshakable conviction that I deserved bodily autonomy and honest relationships. The battle wasn't over, but tonight had marked a turning point. I had faced my greatest fear, public family confrontation, and emerged with my dignity and boundaries intact. Whatever came next, I would face it from this new position of strength. The months following the hospital gala confrontation brought significant changes to every aspect of my life. The most immediate were the legal consequences my parents faced for their actions. The hospital pursued charges related to medical fraud, resulting in a 6-month suspension of both my parents' law licenses and mandatory ethics training. They were required to pay a substantial settlement to the hospital, which established a new security protocol for medical records access that would be named, somewhat ironically, the Anderson Protocol. My parents' initial attempts at apology were transparent efforts to mitigate legal consequences rather than genuine remorse. "We only wanted what was best for the family," my mother insisted during a tense phone call. "We never meant to hurt you." "What you mean to do and what you did are different things," I replied calmly. "I need time and space before considering any kind of reconciliation." With Dr. Wright's guidance, I established clear boundaries: no unscheduled visits, no group confrontations, no discussions of surrogacy or Diane's fertility treatment. Any violation would result in immediate termination of contact. These boundaries, so foreign to our family dynamic, were met with resistance but eventually reluctant compliance as my parents realized their usual tactics would no longer work. Diane's journey took a different path. The public collapse of her marriage and fertility plans forced her into intensive therapy. Initially, she attended only to prove to Will that she was working on herself in hopes of reconciliation. Gradually, however, the therapy began making genuine inroads. "My therapist says I've built my entire identity around becoming a mother," she admitted during a carefully orchestrated coffee meeting 3 months after the gala incident. "She says I need to rediscover who Diane is separate from that goal." "That sounds like valuable insight," I offered cautiously, still wary of her capacity for self-reflection. "She also says," Diane continued studying her coffee cup intently, "that I've been complicit in an unhealthy family dynamic that's hurt you. That I've benefited from Mom and Dad's favoritism while denying it existed." She finally met my eyes. "I'm starting to see that might be true." These admissions represented significant progress, though our relationship remained fragile. We began a tentative practice of monthly sister lunches in neutral public locations with agreed-upon time limits and topics that steered clear of fertility discussions. Will and Diane entered marriage counseling with mixed results. Their counselor identified patterns of communication breakdown and enmeshment with my parents that had eroded their foundation. While they remained legally separated, they maintained contact and slowly began rebuilding their relationship on more equal footing. "Will says he might consider discussing family planning again," Diane shared during our 4th lunch meeting. "Not now, but maybe in a year if we can establish a healthier relationship first. And he's talking about adoption rather than more fertility treatments." "How do you feel about that?" I asked, genuinely curious about her evolution. She considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I would have said adoption wasn't an option, that I needed a biological child to feel complete. Now, I'm not so sure. There are so many children who need loving homes. This shift in perspective represented profound growth that I couldn't help but respect, even as I maintained careful emotional boundaries with my sister. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished despite initial concerns that family drama might taint my reputation. If anything, the incident highlighted my ethical backbone to hospital administration. When a prestigious fellowship in reproductive ethics opened, Dr. Friedman personally recommended me. "You've lived the ethical dilemmas many only theorize about," he noted. "That perspective is invaluable in this field." In my personal life, Noah remained my steadfast support. His unwavering presence during the family crisis deepened our connection, and 6 months after the gala incident, he proposed during a weekend hiking trip to Crater Lake. The sapphire ring he offered reflected the deep blue waters behind us. "I love you," he said simply. "Your strength, your compassion, your integrity. Will you marry me?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." Planning our wedding raised inevitable questions about family involvement. After careful consideration and many therapy sessions, I decided not to invite my parents to the ceremony. The decision brought both sadness and relief, a combination Dr. Wright assured me was normal when establishing healthy boundaries with family. "Your wedding day should be filled with people who genuinely support and respect you," she reminded me. "That's not a punishment for your parents, it's protection for you." Grandfather Joseph, now 92 but still sharp-minded, was honored to walk me down the aisle. "You are the best of this family," he told me as we prepared to enter the small garden venue where 70 of our closest friends and Noah's family waited. I couldn't be prouder. We created a ceremony that celebrated chosen family as much as biological connections. Noah's parents embraced me fully, offering the unconditional support I had never experienced from my own. My colleagues, who had witnessed both my professional dedication and personal trials, filled several rows, their presence a testament to the community I had built outside my family of origin. Diane attended without our parents, a choice that demonstrated her ongoing effort to establish independence from their influence. She brought a simple silver frame containing a childhood photo of us building a sandcastle together on the Oregon coast, one of the few uncomplicated happy memories we shared. "I'm working on being the sister you deserve," she whispered during the reception. "Thank you for giving me that chance." The wedding represented not just my union with Noah, but my commitment to building a life based on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. As we exchanged vows, promising to support each other's growth and honor each other's autonomy, I felt the weight of old family patterns lifting from my shoulders. In the aftermath of the medical records scandal, I established a support group for women experiencing family pressure around reproductive choices. Meeting monthly at the hospital, the group provided a safe space for sharing stories of coercion, boundary violations, and the complicated emotions that family expectations about childbearing often evoke. "You've turned your painful experience into a healing resource for others," Dr. Santos observed after sitting in on a session. "That's the mark of true resilience." Diane and Will's journey took an unexpected turn when, after a year of therapy and rebuilding their relationship, they began exploring domestic adoption. They connected with a young woman named Jamie, who was seeking an open adoption plan for her unborn child. "Would you be willing to meet her?" Diane asked during one of our sister lunches. "She has questions about the medical aspects of pregnancy and delivery, and I immediately thought of you." The request represented a significant shift in our dynamic, acknowledging my expertise rather than viewing my body as a resource. I agreed to meet Jamie and answered her medical questions professionally while supporting her agency in the adoption process. My parents' attempts to reestablish control continued, though, with diminishing frequency and intensity as they encountered my consistent boundaries. When they learned of Diane and Will's adoption plans, they initially resisted. "But it wouldn't be your real grandchild," my mother protested during a family dinner that grandfather Joseph had insisted on hosting. "Eleanor," my grandfather interjected firmly, "that kind of thinking is exactly what has damaged this family. A child is a child, and love makes a family, not genetics." His rebuke, delivered with patriarchal authority my mother still respected, silenced further objections. Slowly, my parents began adjusting to the new family dynamic, where their preferences no longer automatically overruled everyone else's needs. Noah and I discussed our own family plans with intentionality and mutual respect. "Whether we have children biologically through adoption or choose not to parent at all, it will be our decision together," I told him, "based on love and choice, not obligation or expectation." The first holiday gathering with our new boundaries in place was hosted at Noah's and my home, a neutral territory that gave me control over the environment. We established clear expectations, limited duration, no discussions of fertility or medical matters, and respect for everyone's personal space. Grandfather Joseph attended as both participant and unofficial mediator, his presence helping to diffuse potential tensions. Though conversations sometimes faltered and old patterns threatened to emerge, we managed to share a meal without significant conflict, a modest success that nonetheless represented enormous progress. As I served dessert, I caught a glimpse of my mother watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Later, as she prepared to leave, she hesitated by the door. "The pie was excellent," she said awkwardly. "Your grandmother's recipe?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Grandpa shared it with me." She nodded, something like regret flickering across her face. She would have been proud of you, the doctor you've become. The comment, perhaps the first genuine compliment she had offered without reference to Diane or family obligation, caught me off guard. "Thank you," I replied simply. My parents had a long way to go in understanding the damage they had caused, but these small moments suggested the possibility of a new relationship, however limited, based on who we actually were, rather than who they demanded we be. One Tuesday afternoon, I received an email that brought my journey full circle. A young woman named Alyssa, who had attended several support group sessions, wrote to thank me for creating the space that had given her courage to refuse her family's pressure to donate eggs to her cousin. "Before hearing your story, I thought I was selfish for wanting to make my own choices about my body," she wrote. "You showed me that boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for healthy relationships." I stood my ground, and for the first time, my family actually listened. Her words crystallized the meaning I had found in my painful experience. By refusing to surrender my bodily autonomy, I had not only protected myself, but potentially changed the trajectory of my family for future generations. The cycle of obligation disguised as love of sacrifice, presented as the only path to belonging, had been interrupted. Standing in my office reading Alyssa's email, I felt a sense of purpose and peace that transcended the family drama that had dominated so much of my life. I had fought not just for my right to say no to surrogacy, but for something more fundamental, the recognition that love without respect is not love at all. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your own well-being and family expectations? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an essential part of healthy relationships. If my story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and I wish you strength in your own path to self-advocacy and authentic connections.